Hi friends, in this video we'll talk about pivot tables. We'll first see what are pivot tables. Second, we'll see how to create pivot tables in Excel. Third, we'll see what are some of the common uses of pivot table. So first, let's start off with what are pivot tables. Pivot tables are simple representation of data in a 2 by 2 or a two-dimensional matrix. What do we mean by that? Let's say, for example, if we have this table here which summarizes date wise who expensed what kind of amount on what type of uh, expenses. For example, mom expense type fuel spent 74 rupees here. Similarly, on food, she spent 235 rupees here on 15th of Jan. And dad spent $20 on sports. If we want to calculate by category, how many rupees did mom, dad, or Kelly spend on each of these types? We would simply go ahead and let's say type here mom, and then we'll say uh, dad here, we'll say Kelly, and let's say we want to find out this amount, total amount spent by dad. You just filter it out here and say the total amount spent here is in this case $80. Okay, so we'll just say 80 over here. Similarly for mom, let's see, it would be total amount spent would be somewhere 2176. So we'll write down 2176 over here. And let's say by Kelly, if we want to see how much money did Kelly spend, and she spent a total of 1080 rupees. So we'll just say 1080 rupees. Now this is the most simplest form of pivot table which summarizes buyer and total amount spent. What if I need to complicate this table further? What if I want to divide this further by category of type? For example, how much money did mom spend on total money did mom spend on fuel or uh, food? Now, as and when we go ahead and increase the complexity, your complexity to create this table will keep on increasing. And for that simple reason, Excel provides a very simple mechanism to create a pivot table. Number two, how to create pivot tables in MS Excel. For that, what you have to do is go to the Insert tab here. Here you will see a pivot table option. Click here and select from a table or a range. Now, as soon as you click that, a pop up window will open which says, how do you want to create a pivot table? For example, where your data would be from a table or a range. You click here and select your source of the data. I've selected the entire range over here, and then the option would be choose where you want the pivot table to be placed. You have two options. First option is to place it on a new worksheet, and the second option is to choose an existing worksheet and place it over there. Now what I'll do is I'll choose an existing worksheet, this worksheet, and place it over here and click on OK. You see that the shell of my pivot table is created already. Now you also see that here you have the pivot fields window popped up, which has all the fields here in my table. We also have these four boxes. And what do these four boxes mean? we'll see in a bit. So let's see. Let's try to create the first table that we created in the first part of the video. So what we'll do is we'll select on buyer, we'll select the amount, and we see that our pivot table is created very easily within few seconds. Now let's analyze or complicate this table further. We'll click on type and drag it in the rows. We see that our rows have been updated with the type of the expenses. For example, sports, books, music, and tickets. They all have been added very seamlessly in this pivot table. Now let's drag this type as to the filter section over here, and we see that our type has moved as a filter. Now let's say I select books and press OK. Now only the expenses that have been for books are shown here, and in this case Kelly, who's expensed some 500 rupees on books, have is the only person who's done that. Now let's we can also select multiple rows over here, and accordingly our table will get updated. Okay. Now let's drag this type field to the column, and we see that our column field is also updated. We see that our column labels have been updated as the type values, and the sum has accordingly been distributed as who spent how much on what type of expenses. Now this is in very seamless way you've created a pivot table that summarizes the expenses of this family. Now, this brings us to the third leg of this video, which where we'll talk about what are some of the common uses of a pivot table. One common use of a pivot table is number one, to create a summary dashboard. Now, for data which is very long, let's say in thousands and thousands of rows, it becomes very complex to create such kind of summary report manually. There is also a need to create simplified charts wherein we can visually see how the trends of the data is, and for that you need a two dimensional matrix often to create a summary of chart. Let's say for example I have to create a simple bar chart with this information. I select this pivot data and go to charts, and let's say I select column chart here, and we see that very easily we've been able to add a column chart over here. Similarly, you can go ahead and create pie charts based on the complexity of the information. So, two very important uses of pivot table: one, to summarize the information in a table; second, the ability to help you generate data so that you can create meaningful charts for your dashboard. Some of the important uses are these for pivot table. Now, if you've liked this video, do comment on this and tell us what are the different ways where you'll be using pivot table. Thank you, and do subscribe to this video.